Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than Tom Hudson, who played Baz Wainwright. Tom, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Very excited.
Not at all, not at all. What we'll do, Tom, is we'll start this episode the way we start every episode. And if you could tell us how you first got into acting.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So it seems a long, long time ago now. I was like I suppose most people you interview as a child actor, not surprisingly. I was about 9, 10 years old, and I went to a drama school here in Manchester, run by a guy called David Johnson, who is infamous in this area. He basically taught loads and loads of actors from the kind of Manchester northwest area, and he was certainly a force of nature. And all the kind of people on Coronation Street, everyone from like Anne Kirkbride, who played Deirdre, right through to, I don't know, Saran Jones, Sarah Lancashire, all that kind of lot that are well known, up to people that are on the show today and people that went on and did, fantastic things. He was an amazing acting teacher and tutor. And I worked with him as a young kid, and attached to his acting school was an acting agency. And from there kind of went on to auditioning and doing lots of different bits and pieces. And a few people that obviously grew up with me then went on to Grange Hill as well. People like Rhys Noy and loads of these other kids and stuff. We sort of grew up together and followed a similar path.
Right, brilliant. And so, was it like a stage school, or were you attending?
It wasn't. It was like a Saturday, Saturday class or something like that, that would go. So I was a really, I would suppose probably hyperactive kid is the best way to describe myself. A lot of energy. And you know what? I wasn't hugely sporty. I wasn't like, the best kid on the football pitch or the rugby pitch, and I wasn't hugely like top sets in maths and all the rest of it. But I had a lot of energy, and my mum took me to this outlet really that I suppose other kids went to play football or rugby, and I went to acting school. It was all this weekend sort of drama thing, and I was always probably talking to myself in the mirror and putting on accents and all the rest of it. And she thought, well, an acting school, that's a good way to do it. And lo and behold, I became obsessed with it, and it was great place to be.
Brilliant. But did you get sort of any like adverse reaction at school? Because like obviously Manchester being Manchester, like for like football and as you said, rugby and stuff. Presumably a lot of lads were doing that. There wasn't many doing the other stuff. So was there any sort of adverse reaction there?
Do you know what? Possibly and probably a little bit initially, but then if you start going on TV, people very quickly are becoming quite interested, and you start earning a little bit of money and all the rest of it, and people are like, oh, okay, so that that acting stuff's is all right, and you know what? I kind of like I lent into it more so than leaning out of it. You know what I mean? Rather because it gave me kind of a confidence and things like that. And there was definitely. I mean, I'm nearly 40 now, so we're going back when I was in primary school and early years of high school. People would think of anything to try and have a go at you or try and cast aspersions against you. And do you know what? I'd lean into it. I'd have characters, accents, voices. I would learn scripts from like say Austin Powers and things like that. I would know every line of everything, and all of a sudden that was like, hey, that you do that bit from Austin Powers or something like that. So in a way, you kind of became known for it, and or I did like Pig in the City. I did the voice of the pig. Just one of my early acting jobs. Okay, this is where it all comes out of the woodwork. I was the voice of the pig for all the like tour that it did. So it went on like This Morning and all the kind of GMTV and all the rest of it.
Wow.
So I played the voice of the pig whilst it's being interviewed. A really weird thing. So, kids in school would say, do the voice of Babe the Pig. I'm like, oh, my all-time favorite actress would have to be Lassie. I think she's a great actress. When I grow up, I want to be just like her. So I did this stupid pig voice, So I became known as like the kid with the pig voice. So as I
Brilliant.
said, just sort of just embrace it. And I say that to any kids these days and all the rest of it. I think people are much more liberal and
Yeah.
open-minded about things these days, which is great. But look, if you're a bit different, a bit quirky, then lean into it, go for it. Be
Yeah.
cool. It's good, and I made a career out of it, so
Yeah,
it can't
yeah,
be all bad.
brilliant. No, you can't knock that.
So,
Okay, so obviously you said there you were going to the like the Saturday club thing, but
yeah.
you got a little bit. You got some work before Grange Hill and stuff, didn't you? Like so.
Yeah, yeah, quite a lot actually, which was great. And I think the first TV show I did was Night School,
Uh-huh.
which was a ITV Granada in Manchester as it was Granada. It's now moved to Salford Quays,
Yeah.
but literally where Coronation Street is and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And that was a great show. Night School, like
Yeah.
Knight. So it's like Knights of the Round Table. And it had some, really fantastic actors like Tony Robinson in and stuff like, Baldrick. And it
Yeah.
was very Blackadder-esque, but it was a
Right.
kids' TV show.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think in a way it was almost too clever for what it was for kids. And
Right.
it ran for two series. And I was in it. Roger Lloyd Pack was in it, who
Yeah.
was Trigger in Only
Yeah.
Fools and Horses. So I was working with some really amazing actors. And it was a very clever, very funny show about Knights of the Round Table, very much like Blackadder. And my character was called Wickham, and he used to get like bullied by the housemaster. Like Roger Lloyd Pack sort of roasted my character on a spit, and
Right.
every week there was always, he's getting stabbed with a joust or javelin. And it
Yeah.
was a really good, funny show, and I filmed that over a couple of summers. And that was my first sort of thing that I
Brilliant.
that I
Yeah.
got into, and it was very, very
And
cool,
then
very tongue in cheek.
when I was looking through about night school, I
Yeah.
noticed Amy Phillips was in it as well, and Amy had been
Yes.
in Grange Hill
Oh, really?
as
See, I
well.
didn't know that. I never
Yeah,
knew that. I never put that
yeah.
connection
But
together.
but also like Matthew Kelly was in it, and Shane Ritchie, and like
Yes.
you say, there was some big names
Loads
there.
of names.
So
Really great names.
for like for a kid, for like your first job, to like, were you aware of how big these people were? Like,
Not at all, not at all. Until I think, maybe my dad looked at like the call sheet or something and
uh-huh.
saw who you working with tomorrow or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, that's that person or this person. And yeah, it was amazing, like you say, that all these people kind of came in and did cameos and
Yeah,
did these little parts. And I think they enjoyed it because it was, as I say, it was a bit slapstick, a bit silly, very, very well written. Really, really good piece. And I didn't even realize who I was working with until
yeah,
years later. You go, oh yeah, I know that person. I've worked with
yeah,
them, or
yeah,
and
yeah,
it, and it was good. And even like I remember being there and being around the Corrie stuff. I remember Jane Danson, who I later worked with in Coronation Street, played
yeah,
Leanne Battersby. She'd sort of just started on the show on Coronation Street, and she'd kind of come in. They were very much like it was the '90s and Spice Girl, and they were
yeah,
the Battersbys was the characters, and they
yeah,
were kind of like, and I remember going, oh my, so that was probably somebody I knew
yeah,
and recognized. All these legends, though, are never even.
yeah,
But I was like, oh no, who's Trigger off Only Fools and Horses?
yeah.
Battersby's off
But,
Corrie, So
but you've just said there about legends, because you worked with quite a few like legendary names. Like I was looking through, because you did Heartbeat, and
it
obviously
did
you
Heartbeat.
had you had
Yeah,
the cast of Heartbeat, but also Russ Abbott
yeah, I
is in
know.
that episode. And
Again, yeah, somebody I didn't even realize who Russ Abbott was at the
yeah,
age of 12 or whatever age I was when I was working with him. And yeah, again, like my dad, like, blooming heck, you work with Russ Abbott or mate, I've got a mate called Ben who's a comic, very good comic. And
uh-huh.
we've been mates for years, did pantos together years ago. And he loved watching Russ Abbott. And I sort of just, casually mentioned, and he was like, oh my,
Yeah,
couldn't believe it. So yeah, it's, yeah, some fantastic people, great to watch, great to learn from.
yeah,
A really good, and that was great about TV shows in those days. There was so many fantastic legendary actors that would
yeah,
lend themselves to an episode of something like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Heartbeat or whatever, which is great, and I think we sort of miss that these
yeah.
days in a
I
lot of
mean,
ways. Yeah.
so like following on from Heartbeat, there was obviously you did the Royal as well, and
Yes.
again
Yeah.
Wendy Craig, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've got to mention Mickey Stark as well.
Oh,
Obviously
I
being a
know. The
Scouser,
Mickey
like,
Stark. Yeah, absolutely. Mickey
um,
Mickey was great and he's a lovely man. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
fantastic,
brilliant.
fantastic. And
I
then
want,
worked with him again later in Coronation
yeah,
Street.
yeah. No,
So yeah,
I wanted to mention something, because looking through what you've been on, you were in something called Green Shoes, Now, the only reason that I wanted to mention this is because you're credited as playing the gorgeous male clubber. That's you haven't got a character name. That's what
No.
you.
Yeah, I gave myself that character name, to be honest with you. Yeah. I think it was male clubber, and I thought, I don't think that sort of describes me enough.
Yeah,
Yeah. That was my edit.
you need a double-barreled first name.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, cringe, right? I don't. Yeah, I've certainly lost that image over the years. But yeah, I don't even know about clubbing these days. So yeah, I certainly lack the gorgeous. But yeah, no, that was a student, like a sort of student film that they'd shot, and I'd done a bit of TV and stuff then, and a friend of mine who was filming on Grange, he was like a third assistant director, or he was a
Right.
runner or whatever on Grange Hill, had an involvement with this film and some students and stuff in Preston, and they said, could you come across and film this thing? And it was like set in a nightclub, and we filmed it very rough and ready and raw around the streets of Preston
Brilliant.
on a night out. And literally, my character, the gorgeous male clubber, is not as gorgeous as he comes across. I know he's actually a bit of a nasty piece of work, and
Right.
sort of grabs this girl. He's quite a hard hitting little short film, and he grabs this girl, and so we were filming it live in Preston. So people were coming up, sort of, trying to get
Yeah.
involved and help, members of the public. So, but Tim Royal, that was who got me involved in that. That's
Brilliant.
his fault. And he went on, I think, and became a director of Coronation Street many
Brilliant.
years afterwards. Went on and has been very successful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all kind of knits together.
Yeah.
As you know,
Like,
I'm sure from talking to people, it's such a
yeah.
small world.
Yeah, like you just mentioned Grange Hill there, so obviously we will talk about that because that's what we're here for.
Sure.
So how did that come about?
Well, that was a series of auditions really, and everybody. Well, what obviously, as you know, the history of Grange
Uh-huh.
Hill moving from Elstree up
Yeah,
to Chilwell to Mersey TV when Phil Redmond
yeah,
sort of brought it back up. We were the first cohort of, I suppose, the first years where it went from being down south to being up north, and then
yeah,
it was a real mix of the
yeah,
the southerners that had it, and the northerners, and there was that kind of clash of north-south divide for
yeah,
for that first year. And yeah, everybody kind of it went out, across the jungle drums. The Grange Hill is moving up north, and so they had to recruit or
yeah,
audition loads of kids from all different ages and different backgrounds for different characters. So it was a big process.
yeah,
So you'd be there, and there'd be like 50, 100 kids of all different ages coming to audition for it, and people you knew and people you'd worked with in the past. And I think I had about six auditions for the
wow,
character of Baz. It was quite a
wow,
lot.
yeah,
And you'd read opposite different people, playing different characters. I had a sister in the show called
yeah,
Annie Wainwright, eventually played by a girl called Lauren. But I read that character opposite loads of different girls,
right,
and
okay,
I didn't hear for maybe about a month afterwards, and I thought, it's such a shame it had gone on and I thought I'd really nailed it, and I
yeah,
was I've not got it, and then I was planning on doing going away for the summer, and I never normally like desperately ring up and say,
yeah, yeah,
what's going on. But I rang up and I went, look, I'm about to go on holiday for the summer. I take it I've not got the part. I just wanted to check
yeah,
before I book my ticket. And he went, oh, no, don't book your ticket. We want you to start. We were just, so I was like, oh, all right.
brilliant,
Yeah. No worries. We didn't even care about the holiday anyway. So, and that was fantastic. And then we filmed over, because it's such a kids' TV show, we filmed
yeah,
over the summer holidays.
yeah,
So it was as limited impact to the kids'
uh-huh.
education as possible. So yeah, that was kind of my summer then for the next
Brilliant,
5 years or however long I did it for,
brilliant.
every
So,
summer.
like you just mentioned there, it was the fact that it was, when production did move to Liverpool, and
Yes.
and Phil Redmond, it was almost like a reboot of the original series 26. It was, you were in there. And because, a lot of the characters had sort of like the same initials, or, names were quite similar and stuff. So obviously you were the brother of Annie Wainwright.
Yes.
And in the original, there'd been Anne Wilson, who didn't have a brother,
Oh,
right?
okay.
But on her first day, Anne Wilson, you see her, she's late for school. And that,
Right.
that became a bit of a theme with the Wainwrights.
Yes.
Because your very first scene, we see Baz and Annie running out of their house.
Yes.
Not just because they're late, but because a glass is getting thrown at them
Yeah.
out the front door,
Yeah.
as well. And you see Baz sort of like, he goes to run back in the house, and it's Annie that sort of stops him and says, "Come on, we're going to be late." Like, and then we then find out that Baz is in year 9, and he is a bit of a complex character, shall we say? But he was also going out with another complex character in Maddie Gilks as well. And when you first realise that they're together, he goes to give her a kiss, and she wouldn't let him because he kept her waiting, and that's just typical Maddie, like there. And that she was saying about, they've been going out all summer, and but she'd hardly been to his house. And you get this feeling that there's something else going on in Baz's life, but you don't quite know what it. And I thought it was quite well done the way Grange Hill did it, because at first you just think, are these kids getting abused, or is there something else going on?
Something else going on.
Yeah, because Annie and Baz would have like lots of conversations about their dad and about their home life, and we can't tell anyone. There's all this going on, and Baz had said like to Maddie, "Oh, my dad can be a bit funny about people going round," and you are sort of wondering what's going on now. Stuart Organ was still in Grange Hill at
yes,
this
he was,
time.
yeah.
Like, what absolute legend, and it's so sad that he's not with us anymore.
Absolutely.
Like, but Mr. Robson has these chats with Baz, so we realise that Baz is meant to have been at the school previously. He's not a new thing,
not a new character,
because Mr. Robson says things like, we're aware that you've missed a lot of school previously and stuff, and he's asking if things are okay at home, and Baz is like, yeah, everything's fine, and we've got all this, as I say, you've got Baz trying to look after Annie and making sure Annie's getting to school. You've got Baz trying to placate Maddie, shall we say, at the same time. And he's got whatever's going on at home. And you think, if this is real life, the lad's 14 years of age, you know what I mean? Like, Grange Hill had done storylines in a similar vein before, but I don't think not as deep, not as intense as this one was, because, like I say, Baz and Annie had a bit of a chat, and they were scared that if anyone from school tried to get in touch with the dad, they said they'd find out something was wrong at home. And so you are thinking, what is going on? And we see there was an episode where Baz had to leave the house by climbing through the window of the house, rather than the upstairs window as well, rather than walk down the stairs and go past his dad. And you've just got because you've got no idea, because you see Annie gets pushed out the house by the dad, and the car's parked not probably in the driveway, but it's right up by the front door and stuff, and you think, what's going on? You realise that dad's a taxi driver, but at the same time you're thinking, if he's a taxi driver, why isn't he parking you know what I mean? It was such a mystery surrounding them, because it looked like when that car's parked up to the door, Baz said, "Oh, it looks like my dad's had another good night." So you're thinking, is he
on the drink?
Is he on the sauce? Or whatever. And then we get the thing where, we just talked about Baz climbing out the window, and he's walking to school, and he has to keep stopping because he's got a sore leg, and Annie's like, "Well, we'll get that looked at school." And he's like, "Well, I can't tell anyone that I've had to climb out the window because my dad was going to chase me,
Chase me out the house with an axe, I think was the line. Yeah.
But then I remember that very well. He ends up going to the doctors and telling them it was a football injury, and he ends up on crutches with a sprained ankle. And then when he goes back to school, you see him sort of giving money. You'd see him giving money to people or collecting money from people, and Maddie again kicks off on him for not telling what's going on.
Yeah.
And then she dumps him for the first time, shall we say?
It was an ongoing saga.
Yeah, he tried to talk his way out of it by saying that his head was cabbaged and he thought he was going to lose his foot. But he told people he'd fell off a step ladder, and he thought that he was going to lose the use of his foot rather than just losing his foot. And then they make up, because this is where the mystery deepens, because they do make up, Baz and Maddie. But when Miss Dyson asked him what had happened to him, he said he'd slipped in the bath, which was a completely different story to what he told Maddie. And in the end, he said his dad had done it to him. because they'd had a disagreement over which channel they were going to watch on the telly, and it had led to a fight, and he'd somehow done his ankle. And Maddie had tried to be sympathetic with it at this point, because in the past their mum had been like an alcoholic and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Baz said that his dad wasn't like that, and that's when we found out that they'd split up, the mum and dad.
Yeah.
And like I say, you know, all this was going on. At parents' evening, Baz went along representing himself. And Mr. Malachi said that they'd sort another night for him, but then Baz said Dad couldn't go because he worked away a lot. And Malachi said to him, "Oh, that must be where you get your bad attendance from." Because even though it was like the 2000s, the teachers still had this sort of like old school approach of like saying anything they wanted to the kids, you know.
Yeah.
And then Baz got angry there and was like, you know, I'm not unlike my dad. I don't take after him. And after Baz had spoken to Mr. Malachi, he went to walk out, but then his dad walked in, and his dad offered to help at the school and stuff, which didn't go down too well with Baz. And he found out that Baz had poor attendance, and the dad wasn't aware of that. Obviously, Baz must have been taking the mick with his dad, not noticing, like, well, you think that's what he's doing anyway. You think he's taking the mick. And the dad, like, sort of is quite harsh in front of him, in front of the teachers with him. And he says to him, he says, "Don't make things any worse." And you're thinking, well, is he abusing him? Is it? And this went on for quite some while, this sort of this back and forth. And then we found out that there was other things going on where, like, Baz and Annie were intercepting letters from the school to the dad, and they were like throwing them away, and they were called in to, like, with Miss Bassinger, and told they could be in serious trouble. But they kept telling each other that they'd be okay if they just kept their heads down. And there was a day where they went back to their house, and Mr. Robson was there trying to see the dad. And Baz told him he wasn't going into their house because he had no right. He kicks off on Mr. Robson. But then you see another visitor came to the house demanding money. And you see Baz giving him this money there. And this fella told Baz, "It's the last time I'm going to wait for my money." So again, you're thinking, what's going on? Like, because like Baz was turning up with like cuts on his hands, and, you know, and all this. Yeah. And the dad turned up at the school again.
Yeah.
And Baz kicks off for him for being there and telling him to go home and sleep. And Baz told Annie that if anyone found out what was going on, they could be split up. And some of the kids are starting to think that Baz was dealing drugs because of the money that was changing hands and stuff. And the next door neighbour had told the dad about Mr. Robson turning up at the house, and Baz telling him to go. And they do start tussling, they do start fighting, and Annie accidentally got hit, and he accidentally gave her a black eye. And he told Baz, like, you know, he wished Baz had never been born and stuff like that. And when you see things like this happening in a kids' TV program, it's really hard hitting, isn't it? To see stuff like that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's fantastic. It's very hard hitting, but it's real. It's real life, and I think it was amazing that they shone a light on it. And
because then we found out that the dad was supposed to be taking tablets, and he wasn't. And so Baz started crushing the tablets up and putting it into his dad's food. And when Annie got the black eye, Baz phoned the school pretending to be the dad and saying that they both had the flu. And that way they got time for Annie's black eye to heal. And then we saw Baz like signing checks in the dad's name and stuff. And this back and forth went on for ages with them, like the dad and Baz like almost fighting with each other, and Baz trying again to take tablets, and the dad saying he didn't need them. Baz and Annie had a chat about the dad and then their mum leaving. And Baz said that they needed to forget about the mum, because once dad was back on his tablets, everything was going to be okay. And Baz and the dad had a good chat about getting the dad on the tablets, and it all seemed good at home. So Baz then tries to get back with Maddie, but Maddie, being Maddie, told them that they were finished. And he bought her like a pendant, like a locker, but she wouldn't accept it because she thought he'd bought it with drugs money because there was this storyline going on that he was dealing, and she said she'd think about getting back with him if he told her exactly what was going on, but he didn't straight away.
Yeah.
And we then found out that the dad had thrown the tablets in the bin again. And even though he had all this going on, I've got to say this for Baz, he fancied himself a little bit, like, because we see him chatting Karen up, even when he was sitting next, even when she was sitting next to Maddie, and then he wrote Karen a note telling her to meet him, but not to tell Maddie. And when Karen then met him, and Karen tried to kiss him, but Baz said that he wanted Maddie back, and she was the only good thing going on in his life apart from his sister. But Maddie told Baz that she wouldn't get back with him, especially if he was sniffing around Karen. So he said he wasn't really, and they did arrange to meet. Maddie went round and demanded to know what was going on. And we then found out that the dad had bipolar disorder. Now, again, like we've said the thing about the kid, but as you said there, to be shining a light on the fact that happened, that's going on. Really, really brave for a kids' TV program to be taken on, especially when, like, what was that, 2002, 2003? Not a lot of people, like adults as well, would have heard of bipolar.
Yeah.
So it just it was really good showing how people's lives can be affected by it. Not just the person who's been diagnosed with it, but, like the family and those close to them as well. And the fact that they didn't know how their dad was going to be whenever they saw him. They didn't know if he was going to be a dad or if he was going to be this angry person who they didn't recognize. And it all came to a head where Baz and the dad started having a fight in the house. And he told Maddie to leave because Maddie was there. He told Maddie to leave because this fight was going to, they were arguing. So Maddie was outside the house and he turned up, and then there was all the shouting inside. Maddie called the police. And as the police turn up, we hear a noise in the house. And when they get the door open, Baz is unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. And Baz ended up in hospital. Now, I've got to ask, when you're filming those scenes where you're unconscious or where you're in the hospital, more so, because there's a lot of acting going on in the hospital, are they difficult to film where you can't react?
Well, where I'm unconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're funny enough. Yeah, they're learning your lines is easy. But trying to stop your eyes from fluttering. Yeah, I mean, they're probably. I think, for a while, for a couple of weeks, I was probably just laying in a bed, going into work to lie in a bed. They can be more difficult because you can feel every itch on your face.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
and you just can't react. So that was tough. But the emotional scene's probably a little bit tougher.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll move on to your next series there.
Yeah, that was just one series. You're right. There's a lot happened.
Year 10. It's series 27, year 10. Dad seems to be okay. They're back in school. He's back with Maddie. But Taylor Mitchell became quite prominent in this one. Taylor, played by Reese Noy.
Yeah.
He was an ex-pupil who'd been excluded previously. But he seemed to be mates with Baz, sort of, at first. And I think it was good that they brought Taylor in, because Baz didn't really have any mates other than Maddie. He didn't really spend any time with anyone other than Maddie. But as I say, he still had Maddie there, and obviously because of what had gone on, Maddie was spending a lot of time with Baz, and Baz said, "Look, I don't need a bodyguard," because she was just looking out for him. And again, that this series again was sort of like, still dealing with what was going on at home, because the dad was the type of character that, although he had all this stuff going on, he didn't, he'd be saying he was okay, but then he'd stop taking the tablets, and there was all this going on. There was a bit where the dad went missing because he was working late. And as the day's going on, they're both panicking a little bit. about where the dad is. And even though Baz is trying to stay calm, you can tell that there's something going on. But they then found out that the dad, as we said, he was a taxi driver. The dad told them that he'd taken a fare to the airport and his car had broken down, basically.
Yeah.
And it was in the days before everyone had a mobile phone. So obviously he couldn't get in touch with them. And then we see a thing where Annie told Baz she'd left her own work at home and she had to go back to get it. Baz realised later on that she hadn't gone back to school. And when she got home, he realised that the dad was there and the dad had kept her off because he thought that she was getting bullied and picked on and wanted her to be safe. And Baz again argued with the dad about not, because the dad had stopped taking the tablets and that the dad could lose Annie and Baz if he didn't take his tablets. And then there's another scene where they go home and the dad's not angry this time, but he's like sitting on his own and he's like talking quite miserably about his tablets weren't solving anything. And the dad like sort of apologized and said that they'd have been better with their mum. And then they find that the bottle of tablets is empty. So obviously they think because of the way he's talking and because of the empty bottle, they think that he's tried to like maybe tried to kill himself, take an overdose. But they couldn't take that risk if he had or if he hadn't. So they had to ring for help. And we see a scene then where the dad locked himself in the bathroom. And then the social worker arrived and they were able to get the door down and get the dad in the ambulance. But they found out that he hadn't taken the tablets, but they couldn't stay in the house alone. And so they were staying at Maddie's. And obviously, you know, Baz and Annie were then having this conflict then because Annie was like saying, you know, you shouldn't have phoned the social worker. We could have looked after the dad. But obviously, because of what had happened, they couldn't stay in the house. But they went back to get some things from the house and they heard a noise downstairs. Can you remember who it was who was in the house?
You know, you're testing me. No, I can't remember. You know, you're going to have to tell me who is it.
Mrs. Wainwright had turned
up.
Oh,
yes, of course. Yeah, Mrs. Wainwright. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Now, I have to ask you, Tom, because like this your storyline, a massive percentage of your stories didn't take place in the school.
Yeah,
it was all true. It was in the house. Now, was it classic Phil Redmond where it was filmed in a house, or were those scenes filmed in a studio?
No, they were filmed in a house.
Were they, right?
So. Yeah, in somebody's house, you know, and sometimes they'd be in the living room, we'd be in the back room, and then we'd have to swap, and they'd come, you know, and the kids would come out from school and things like that. So as you say, very much like Phil Redmond, and everything was real, you know, as real as it could be. And I think that's what he did well. And when he brought it back to Liverpool, brought it up to Liverpool, injected a lot of that realism and a lot of that kind of adults, you know, and all the writers and stuff were all like Brookside writers and all, you know, so used to dealing with some pretty good storylines, you know, in an adult world. But yeah, very much it was, and it was on the estate that it was filmed. So you'd have kids that'd be around, obviously in summer holidays and stuff like that. You'd have 100 kids or whatever, all kind of on bikes up and down as you were coming in, shouting abuse at you and stuff. As you were walking in your school uniform in the middle of, you know, August or something like that.
A good chilled wall welcome for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I can't even remember. I don't think it was sure. It was somewhere into Liverpool, but it was a good, you know, it was good and it was real and it was absolutely in somebody's house. Yeah.
And what people say, like what people have spoken to before, they've said when they got like the family scenario, it was good because not only was it not just in the school, but it helped flesh out your character a little bit more. It made it just, you weren't just a school pupil, you had other things.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I think that was a clear part of Baz's character was his kind of protection of his sister. So he felt that kind of big brother thing, and as you say, divided over the things that we all probably feel as teenagers, you know, in a selfish sort of sense. You know, you're the center of your own world probably at that time, but between himself, he was juggling, as you say, a relationship with his sister, his dad, his girlfriend, and obviously his schoolwork and his teachers and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, and it was great to be able to film that
Yeah.
stuff, both in school and out of school,
Brilliant.
flesh out the character a lot. And I didn't actually know, when we took the parts and all the rest of it, how I didn't know whether the character is going to be in one scene
Yeah.
or an episode, or whether he's going to have a real kind of lead story as he
Yeah.
transpired to have in that first series and beyond. So every new episode I'd get, I would
Yeah.
read it like an audience member, like, oh wow, what's going to happen to him this week? So as it kind of evolved, and you said it at the top there, that you didn't know as an audience member, it was kind of drip fed. What's
Yeah.
happening? What is going on? Is he on the wrong side of the law? Is he drug dealing? Is his dad drinking?
Yeah.
What's happening? What is this? The question mark over him. So I sort of learned as it went through,
Yeah.
and I thought that was great as well. We
Yeah.
weren't sort of told in advance this is where it's going,
Right. I get you. Yeah.
which was really good to sort of see it and feel how it
Yeah.
evolved, because it was in the dark as well. But
Yeah, no, I mean, like, 'cause the thing with the mum was the mum turned up, and obviously that they had so much anger towards the mum because
yeah,
of for leaving them.
I thought they'd been left. Yeah,
Yeah, and then she wanted them to go and live with them,
so,
and they
yeah,
didn't want to know. So what they did was they rang the social worker. The social worker turned up and told the mum that they'd been placed under a temporary care order because she was trying to move them without permission, because the dad still had legal custody, even though he was away.
he wasn't
Um,
well.
the mum had no right to do that because the dad had the legal custody. So they did go and live with foster parents, and Baz seemed to quite like it and settle in because he had like routines and stuff. But Annie still wasn't happy. But they found out that their dad was getting better and their dad could leave and go home. And Annie assumed that she'd be going back to live with the dad straight away. And in the end, the foster mum was talking to Baz and was like, look, you're going to have to tell him that. You have to tell her you can't go back straight away. And in the meantime, back at school, obviously, you had Baz and Maddie, but there was also Max Humphreys. And Max Humphreys was a bit of a bad lad, and Max had been picking on Martin quite a
Yeah,
bit. And when Baz found out, he went and had a go at Max. And he went to hit him, but Kathy stopped him. And Max went to hit Martin again. And Baz backed him up again. And Max then left him alone, which I thought that was a good side, always a good side of Baz's character, that he wouldn't back down if he thought someone was if he thought someone was getting picked on or something was getting said unfairly to them, he'd be on their side. And at the end, we just talked about Annie thinking that she could go and live with the dad, but Baz had to tell Annie that they could go and see him, but they couldn't stay with him because he just wasn't fit to be looking after him anymore. And they found out again that the dad told them that he wasn't going to take his tablets anymore. He actually came out this time and said, look, I don't want to be relying on them.
yeah,
But they both managed to convince him that he needed to. And again, towards the end of that year, things were looking better. They were getting on at home, and Dad was back on the tablets. And he asked Maddie again if they could go out again. But she said she couldn't get back with him because he had too much going on. Now, I have to say, in that episode, the end of that episode, it was, I don't know if you remember this, everyone was dressed in different costumes from different time periods because it was Grange Hill's 125th anniversary.
Yeah.
Everyone was dressed in different time period costumes except for Baz. Was there any reason why?
I think it was just the case he was so not involved in it, out of it, and I think it was probably a kind of nod towards the fact that his school life wasn't the biggest thing in his life, which is probably again true of us when we're kids, that school is everything, isn't it? But actually, for him, it was having this whole other thing going on outside.
Yeah. Okay. So we move on then to the next series, year 11, series 28. Things were loads better. Baz's dad was still taking the tablets, and Baz told Maddie that his dad was happy and things were good. And I couldn't quite believe this when it happened. We actually saw Baz smile.
Wow. First time in 3 years. Yeah.
But that was until Maddie said that again, that they should leave everything behind them, leave everything that had happened in the past. But Baz still wanted to be friends with Maddie, But every time he tried talking to her, she'd like roll her eyes and walk away and just being Maddie, basically. Like, I have to ask, when you're in a close relationship like that on set, what was it like working with Casey?
With Casey,
Yeah.
well, she's fantastic. She's a lovely girl, and but intimidating. I was intimidated,
Really?
of
Yeah.
course, when I first. Oh well, she's gorgeous, confident, talented. And she obviously, we, as I say, we started working together when all the Southern lot came up north. Okay, so she knew everybody, and I was just this geeky guy. And I think day one it was like, right, you guys go sit there on the grass and kiss each other. And I was like 14 myself. I was like, but no, really, really nice girl, lovely girl, very talented, as I say.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's all good. I think everybody got to become mates. We were all of a similar age, going through a similar
Yeah.
weird initiation
Yeah.
into the world. So but that was fine. Yeah,
I, I,
working with all the guys.
I have to say with Casey as well, because when you see her in the In-Betweeners,
Yes.
she's a very similar character to Maddie, isn't she? She's like
Yeah.
she takes no rubbish from anyone, like
Absolutely not.
and says what she thinks. Like,
Yeah, Casey's like that too. No, I haven't spoken to her for a long time, but no, she was a very sweet girl. But yeah,
yeah,
definitely, she was definitely of her own character and
yeah,
knew
yeah.
herself really well.
I love that, love that. Now you got a few more, so shall we say, light-hearted things going on, because
Yeah,
there's a scene
it was
in
about
this.
time,
Yeah,
that he got a
there's
little
a
bit, a
because
bit of
that
a
was what
reprieve.
Grange Hill always did that well. They'd have like a storyline like yours going on, but then they'd have all like the idiots like Togger
The
and
light-hearted
things
stuff,
like
yeah,
that going on. And there was a scene with Togger which involved Baz's bike,
right,
because Baz had this brand new bike and Mr. Malachi had the same bike. Don't know if you remember this. Baz's bike was parked up, and
yeah,
it was where Mr. Malachi usually parked his. So Togger assumed it was the same bike.
and it wasn't.
There was a big delivery of manure coming,
Yeah,
so Togger got him to empty the manure onto where the bike was, and he thought it was Malachi's, but then he found out that it was Baz's,
yeah.
and he found out it was because Baz turned up, kicked off, and threw him into the manure, telling him he needed to get digging. Was it real manure?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Of course it was. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. And when Togger to get the bike out, the bike still stunk. So he told Togger he needed to clean it. Can you remember how Togger cleaned the bike?
No, I can't. I can't. You're really testing me now. This is good. This is
He
a good trip down memory lane.
he threw it in the swimming pool.
Oh, brilliant.
Now he threw
I
it in the
don't
swimming
remember it.
pool.
I remember I ended up in that swimming pool.
Yeah,
I can
we'll
remember
talk
that.
about
That comes up
that in
later.
a bit. Yeah, he
God,
threw
I
it
was
in.
busy. This is great to listen to this back.
Yeah,
This is
no
fantastic. This
worries.
is a
No,
real trip down memory lane.
he threw it in the swimming pool and left it there. And obviously, Baz found it and told Togger he was a dead man. But what he did was Togger's clothes went missing, and Togger eventually found his clothes in the swimming pool because Baz
I'd
had
have thrown them
taken
in.
them to get them back. Yeah, and Baz and Maddie had another argument
Hmm.
where she told him he was only interested in himself, and he used his dad to act however he wanted. Now you think that's a little bit harsh, that, like, because it's obviously as a 15, 16-year-old girl, she hasn't realized the enormity of what was going on, but you just think that's a bit harsh, like. So Baz then says to Maddie, he told her she'd walk over anyone to get her own way. And you think, go on, lads, yeah, you've done
You're on
well
my
there, like.
side.
And he told Maddie later on, Baz, that he was seeing someone else, expecting her to be jealous, but it didn't quite work like that. She just said that she was quite happy for him. Now,
Yeah.
this was on the day of the football trials where the academy scouts had come to watch them. And because he was angry about Maddie and the way things had gone, he just kept fouling people and kicking the ball away and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, when you're doing the football stuff, is there much choreography that goes into that? Or was it a case of there's a ball, go and do what you want?
No, there has to be. Yeah, I wish it was as easy as that. We could play around with it. I think I think the poor directors and assistant directors and everyone had more of a difficulty trying to get us to focus because you
Right.
get a group of kids together,
Yeah.
put a football in the mix, and it's like all of a sudden everything goes out
Yeah.
the window. You're like, no, you're here to do a job, guys. So yeah,
Yeah.
you'd have to obviously cameras fixed. You got to hit ball from A to B and or run with it or whatever. So there's a bit of it's quite a bit of choreography with it,
Right.
but yeah, but football, yeah, fateful football. That's where it
Yeah.
goes in the end.
Brilliant. And because of the way he acted, Malachi told him that he'd never play football for Grange Hill ever again. Now, I never understood the football in those series because it just seemed to be anyone that was a principal, any lads that was a principal character was playing for the team, regardless of their age.
Their age or ability
Yeah.
or anything like that. Yeah, yeah. Everyone was just lumped to.
Yeah.
You're right.
And then Annie got a letter from their mum saying that she was going to have a baby, which Baz wasn't that bothered about. But Annie was like, we should be ringing social services. And Baz was like, what for? The mum had never done anything to them other than leave. And like you say, that we see again Annie having this hard time of like dealing with what's going on. And he said to Annie that, he was probably as cut up as she was about the mum being pregnant, but there wasn't really a great deal that they could do about it. So they needed to start accepting it. But having this chat with Annie meant that he was late for his swimming practice. Again, Malachi kicking off. He was told to go home. He didn't have the right attitude for any team in the school because it was just going from when you think everything's over, it's just going from bad to worse for him. Yeah, he was given another chance within the swimming team, and he was going to practice, but he realised he had to go and get tablets for his dad. And Malachi saw him not at the pool and had another go at him and gave him his final warning. And Taylor then started winding Baz up about his mum being pregnant, and they started fighting. And this time, Baz was kicked off the swimming team for good. And Baz clearly wanted something to happen with Maddie, but Max was acting, he was like fancying her as well. And when Maddie told Max she didn't want to go out with him, Max then went to hit Martin because obviously Maddie and Martin were quite close.
Yeah.
But Baz jumped in and stopped him from hitting Martin. And again, Malachi was there. No, it was always Malachi always seemed to catch Baz doing it and not the other way around. He saw Baz go for Max and threatened to exclude him. But this time, Maddie jumped in and said it was their fault. He was just messing about and she'd slipped them up and stuff. And it looked like Baz and Maddie were getting on and something might happen. But again, she told him she still didn't want to go out with him. Even when he said, look, did you want to come for a coffee with me? And she said, no. When he said, why not? Martin, obviously Martin being the way Martin was, told him that Maddie had said Baz was selfish and that she deserved someone better, which then saw Baz then going for Martin, which it was broken up straight away. And Baz sort of realised straight away what he'd done. And, he was trying to like apologise and was sent out. And then Max came along again and winding Baz up. And they arranged what you think is going to be a fight outside school. And when they're both there, though, Baz ran off from Max, and Max chased him onto the roof of the school. Don't know if you can remember this one, but it was quite a convoluted setup. This of Baz had set up 2 ropes for him to climb down the outside of the school, and he sort of challenged him to like this abseil down the school. Now, while they're doing it, Max then fell. And Baz had to ring an ambulance and Max had broken his arm. It wasn't as bad as first feared, but was there much health and safety going on in these scenes?
It probably doesn't look like it if the directors did their job well, and I'm sure they did, but it's always absolutely stunt coordinators and all that kind of thing. So it wasn't us abseiling down the wall. If I had to burst anyone's bubble, let's put it that way, but it was very much health and safety.
And obviously Baz and Max had this feud going on. Sorry, his name escapes me.
James.
James, that's it.
Yeah.
What was your relationship like with him?
Oh, hilarious! He's one of
Is
the
he? Yeah.
funniest guys. And again, we sort of started at the same time. Both Northern lads, similar age.
Yeah.
I think we probably met at the auditions or something like that. And yeah, he was a funny guy. He was a funny guy. Very very nice. We went out a few times after as we got
Oh, brilliant.
older, a few drinks and stuff like that. So no,
Yeah.
he was played that character very well.
Excellent.
But very funny lad in real life. Really
Yeah.
nice guy.
Yeah. And then all that led on to, like, obviously Baz could have been excluded, and the dad came in, and the dad said, "Oh, we need to you need to start being a little bit more like Annie, because Annie's doing really well now at school." But unbeknownst to them, she signed up for a credit card. She'd racked up a huge credit card bill in her mum's name, um,
Yeah.
which we'll come on to. But there was also a school football match, which Baz was banned from playing in, but everyone was still expected to go and watch. But Baz said he'd go and watch it because if it meant him getting back in Malachi's good books. But in the meantime, Spencer had realised that Alex had gone to the swimming pool to try and drown himself, because obviously Alex had that I've said this before, it's arguably the best bullying storyline in the history
Mm.
of Grange Hill. I think the Alex Pickering storyline. Josh has been on here, and
Yeah.
it was the longest episode we had because there was so much to talk about with
Yeah.
Josh. Like, what a
Yeah,
lad.
he's a good lad. He's a good lad, yeah.
And so obviously when Spencer realised this, he grabbed Baz to go and help him, and they both jumped in the pool. Now, whenever I'm putting an episode of the podcast on out, I always put picture clues online for people to try and guess who the guest is going to be, and the first person to guess gets to ask the next person a question. So
Mm.
I've got a question from someone called Chris,
Mm.
and he's asked how much prep was needed for when you were filming that. Yeah,
So filming that scene.
yeah, filming the scene in the swimming pool, and the CPR and stuff, and what are your memories of filming that?
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a lot. There's a swimming pool in Mersey TV, as
Uh-huh.
it was called then, Line Pictures, I think it
Yeah,
is now, and quite a lot. I'm sure it was a day or more that we filmed that whole sequence really in, which is quite a long time for all of that stuff. And
yeah,
obviously, there's underwater cameras and getting him out of the water and who's going to do what between me and Colin, the guys playing
yeah,
Spencer, and getting him out of the pool, and as you say, doing all the CPR and stuff. And it was a real hard hitting
yeah,
storyline, as you say, and you want to get it right.
yeah,
You don't want it to look convoluted and childlike, or and so I think we were all very motivated to make it look as good as it could,
yeah,
and a fantastic crew to make it happen. So hopefully, people did see it, and
yeah,
it was touch and go, and also to have Josh's character Alex there, and he was all blued up, and he looked,
yeah,
asphyxiated, and he looked dead, and it
yeah.
was it's horrible, really horrible, horrible to film, but worthy to film, I
And
think.
did the atmosphere change on set when you're filming stuff like that?
Yeah, when you're filming tough stuff like that, it's certainly not all, it's not the light-hearted banter
Uh-huh.
that you get when you get a load of school kids together who
Yeah,
are, filming a great show like Grange Hill, because you're filming something very serious, and even more so than the stuff that I was doing in the first series I was in with the dad and with Annie and all that stuff, which was pretty hard hitting. But this is suicide, and
yeah,
it's a young kid, and it's really tough, and at that age, you sort of you're also not very mature
yeah,
to play that role, so you kind of caught up in confused emotion
yeah,
of it all anyway, naturally. So yeah, it was tough to do, and tragic, and
yeah,
thankfully not as tragic as it could have been.
yeah. I mean, I know when I was speaking to Josh, he said when they first started filming that he couldn't actually sink. Like
Yeah,
he just kept floating all the time.
to weigh him down.
Yeah, so they had to put all kinds in him, like
Yeah,
to,
yeah, definitely.
to
That's
get him
it.
to
And you've got
sink.
to go. Yeah, I remember it was like as well. I hate opening my eyes underwater, so it was like open. I didn't. I was like, Where is it? Where? I
Yeah,
couldn't. I couldn't. I always see these movies where people are like, swimming with their eyes open. I'm like, oh God, I'd hate to be able to do that.
yeah.
But luckily, Colin was. He did all the hard. He did all the hard stuff. I just came in the hero at the
Which
end.
like that's weird, isn't it? Because when you watch it, it's it's Baz doing the majority of it, and Spencer's only there as like the extra, like yeah. Okay,
clever editing. Absolutely.
And as we said, Annie had this credit card bill and all that, and she was borrowing money from people, and Maddie told Baz that Annie had borrowed money from her, and then he went to find Annie, and he caught her with all kinds of stuff in her bag, including the school laptop that she'd nicked. And that was when she then told Baz about the credit card that she'd taken out of her mum's name. And they were trying to get it back. They were trying to get the laptop back because Annie had said that she'd done the credit card to try and get back at her mum, not realising she'd have to pay for everything.
Yeah.
They were caught when they were trying to put the laptop back by Mrs. Basinger. Baz tried to take the blame, but Annie wouldn't let him. And then the police come. And then when we found out in the next series, Annie had actually had to go and live with her mum because of what had happened, to stop her getting the community service order and all that. So Annie was living with the mum. Baz had a new girlfriend, and Maddie tried talking to his new girlfriend, but the girl ignored her. And then we then found out that she was deaf.
Yes.
Holly was Baz's new girlfriend. But this was another one. Holly had always been at the school. But she says to Maddie, you're only noticing me now. Yeah. But was that challenging playing opposite her?
Yeah. Of course, as it was supposed to be. Yeah. I think again, like Grange Hill did. It didn't swerve the issues. It didn't swerve any issues with disability and things like that. And so it was a pleasure as well as something that's tough, because it's a different way of working. And again, so proud to be involved in so many different storylines that, as I say, shine a light on issues that everybody, people come across in day-to-day life, in real life, in school. So it was, but it wasn't difficult, but not difficult. The guys at Grange Hill made it easy, and and acting wise and stuff like that, it was great.
And apologies again, I forget her name.
Rebecca.
Rebecca, that's it. Yeah. So did she teach you how to do sign language and stuff?
I think there's a little bit of it in the show. Right. Yeah, a little bit, but not much.
But was it her? It wasn't someone else teaching. It was her. That's what it was. It wasn't.
Yeah, that's right. And I think part of the thing with that though as well, and it was a lesson to us all, as well, when she was there, was we've become a very close-knit, tight-knit community of mates over the past few years that we've done. And of course, when she came, because she is deaf, she, I think, struggled a little bit with everybody kind of communicating so fast, and perhaps felt a little bit marginalized. I hope she wouldn't mind me saying it, because I think it's important to sort of raise the issue. And I think we all had to, as a cast, go, oh shit, we're not realizing here that we should be making more of an effort, and then we're making somebody feel totally unintentionally on our part as kids. But I think again, it's you're learning on the set, but you're learning off the set as well, and that was all part of the beauty of the show, really.
Yeah, and you think that this relationship's going to be brilliant for Baz, fresh new start, and then Baz tells her about everything that's gone on in his life, and she says, "I can't be dealing with this. I've got two. My life's complicated enough," and just walks off. And Baz had a bit of a chat with her and told her that her home life, it shouldn't be a factor in them going out. And they were getting on and about to get back together when Emma, who was played by Daniela, came over and spoke to him about his mum having the baby. Baz had a new baby brother, but Baz didn't know anything about it. And he got angry. And when he turned round, Holly had gone, because Holly had obviously realised what the conversation was about. Now, also in this year, Baz had a new mate who we'd never seen before in Donnie Briscoe, played by Rob Norbury. And Baz had a chat with Donnie about Holly dumping him. And he was convinced. He said, she's only done it so that her and her mate can have a good laugh at me, have something to talk about. So Donnie, who was going out with Eleanor, who was Holly's mate, Donnie walked over and finished her because of that, good lads sticking together. And there's a scene where, we've talked about Rebecca, who played Holly. She's walking across the playground and she drops her stuff in the playground and she bends down to pick it up. And she doesn't hear the bin wagon coming to get her. And it's obviously Baz sprints across the playground to save her, Baz to the rescue. But he asked her, and then he asked her if she'd get back with him because she was so happy and relieved, and she said no again.
Poor Baz.
Now, we just mentioned Donnie there. Maddie asked Baz why he was hanging around with Donnie, and she said that he was a prejudiced bigot, which didn't really come out at first, all that with Donnie. And Baz said that Maddie was doing what she always did, which was criticizing people. And she just said that she was trying to warn him away from Donnie. And we start realizing that maybe Donnie wasn't very nice at first. Yeah. And maybe Maddie might have actually had a point, to be honest. But Baz said that Maddie was the only person that he should have been warned away from years ago. And after that, might have been a contributing factor, but Maddie then left Grange Hill. Now, we said there, you know, Maddie left, Annie left. So that's obviously two big characters in Baz's life were no longer around. But what's it like when people that you've got to work with, you know, the likes of Lauren and Casey, when they suddenly leave? Obviously, like, you know, you're working on this. It's a program and it's on for so many years, and obviously people are going to leave. But what's it like when the people who you've worked closely with? How do you feel when all of a sudden that you're not working with them anymore?
Yes, it's sad. It's you know, very 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 sad and stuff. I try not to take it personally that the two people that had to work with me every day ended up leaving. But it must have been something to do with me. But no, I mean, of course, you know, you're happy for them because hopefully they're going on to other things and doing other things in their life and choosing to do other things. And you know, they're both gone on to be successful in their own ways and all the rest of it. But yeah, of course, it's like anyone that you're working with in any capacity. You know, you've had some good times, some good laughs, and you've shared a lot of memories and growing up together in, as I said, a very weird environment that is Grange Hill, where you're kind of thrown together and you're in this bubble, and then all of a sudden somebody that's in the bubble isn't there every day anymore. But you know, it's we go on and everyone keeps in touch and all the rest of it. So yeah.
Brilliant. But now, Baz then started seeing Tanya, who was obviously a couple of years younger, and they kept it quiet at first. And Tanya thought that it was because he didn't want to be seen with her, but he was worried about how other people would react to them. But then he tried to give her a kiss, and she sort of makes her excuses and runs off. And there's all sorts of things where Tanya would hide when she saw him, and Karen clocked her and worked out that they were going out. And she asked Baz to stop seeing Tanya because he was older, and he said that she wouldn't, and Karen couldn't do anything about it. But a lot of people seem to have a problem with them going out. Obviously, one was Karen, who was Tanya's older sister. One was Togger, because there was always that sort of love-hate relationship between Togger and Tanya.
Yeah.
But then we also found out that Donnie had a bit of a problem with it as well, because Karen and Tanya were sisters, and they were a mixed race family. And as I say, there was always little comments from Donnie, which were never too bad at first. And Baz and Donnie, as different as they were, seemed to get on really quite well with each other. And they have a bit of a feud with Max. They were having this ongoing feud with Max, who we've talked about already, which resulted in Baz's bike being stolen, but it was sold on the Grange exchange. You remember that? It was sold to Taylor, and he did eventually get it back. And Taylor confronted Max, and all Max's mates appeared. Now, Baz tried to get involved to jump in with Taylor, but again, it was Donnie that stopped him. Donnie stopped him, and when Baz asked him why, it was because he said he didn't think Taylor would have jumped in with them, because Taylor didn't act like the rest of them. And Baz is sort of like saying, "What, you know, what are you on about?" Like, and he goes, "Oh, I just think he wouldn't jump in it. He wouldn't if it was the other way around." But you start getting the feeling then that Donnie had sort of ulterior motives in what he was saying. And Taylor and Max had a fight then, and Max's mates jumped in, and Baz tried to jump in again. Donnie stopped him again, saying, Taylor had got himself into it, he could get himself out, but Baz wasn't listening this time. Baz jumped in. And eventually Donny jumped in, more so because Baz was involved, not because Taylor was. And like I say, there'd always been some sort of undertone with Donny that there was possibly some racism involved, but we were never quite sure until we saw Donny speaking to Taylor. And he referred to himself as Tarzan because he said, I'm the big white guy helping out the natives. And you just, that line of talk carried on a bit with Donny because Donny, Taylor, and Baz were talking about the Olympics. It was going to be happening in 2012 in London.
Yeah.
And Baz said it'd be great representing your country. And Donny says, representing our country, and looks over at Taylor and you think, blimey, where's this, where's it come from? And then there's all nonsense then where Donny's going on about black people can't swim properly because their bones were too heavy. My granddad told me that. And Baz is like, you're an idiot. That's an absolutely ridiculous thing to say because he clearly didn't agree with what Donny was saying, which was, it was good to see that because there was times where Baz sort of backed down a little bit from Donny. And Donny then wanted to know how far Baz and Tanya had got. And Baz wouldn't say anything. But in the end, he said he'd got enough when he was going out with Holly and it will be the same with Tanya. And again, for a kids' TV program to be exploring this, because people say when it was in Liverpool, it wasn't the same as when it had been for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But usually people haven't looked into it as in depth and looked at these storylines and the fact that there was storylines going about racism. There was drugs. There was bullying. There was suicide. There was sex getting mentioned, all that. And,
It's huge.
It was massive. It was massive. And when Baz had said that to Donny, he didn't know Tanya was listening. And Tanya always found excuses then not to be alone with Baz because Tanya was obviously worried about what might happen. And there's a scene where Baz and Tanya are sitting outside on a chair underneath a fire escape and they are kissing and Baz is still trying to take things further. And I've asked you, was it difficult to film the scene when you were unconscious, but was it difficult to film those scenes with someone, especially with someone who you've become quite friendly with? And
of course. Kirsten, again, a lovely girl, really nice person. We'd worked together for years. I think we probably met at the auditions as well, and her character had been very close with Lauren, Annie's character, so we've sort of grown up again together. I mean they're not uncomfortable in the sense that obviously you're working, you're professionals, and everyone was really, really professional even at such a young age. But obviously you're playing. You're doing something that you don't particularly feel comfortable with, and I suppose you shouldn't feel comfortable with it. And but they're tough. They're tough to play. But also you're sort of living it. That was always the thing of Grange Hill. Whilst you say there's stuff going on the screen, you're also at that age where in your day-to-day life you're going to school and you're chatting to girls, or you've got mates, or you're trying to be a lad, but also you're totally self-conscious and you're geeky and gawky and have absolutely no clue about anything anyway. So you're living that life out off the set and on the set as well. So it was tough to play again, but true to life, I suppose. I'm talking about my terrible love life.
No. Eventually, Tanya told Baz that they shouldn't be going out. He needed to be with someone his own age because she was too young for him. Which, I think it's really good because that was another thing to show kids who would have been going through similar things that you don't have to go through stuff if you don't want to. You know what I mean? I think it was really good that was the line it took rather than the line it could have taken. Now,
definitely.
We've talked about Donny and the fact that he wasn't very nice, and there'd be times where he was making fun of people, and Baz would let him. Baz would just watch. He wouldn't say anything. And in the end, Martin had to chat with him and said to him, "Why aren't you sticking up for anyone?" He said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well," he said, "one thing I always knew about you was that you were fair, Baz. Like you'd always stick up for people." but you're not. You don't do that now since you've become Donnie's mate. And so later on, Donnie made fun of Holly, and Baz went for him, and they started fighting. It was broken up, and Baz walked away. And there's a little conversation between Baz and Holly where Holly had said, I couldn't go out with you because of the baggage you were carrying, but it looks like you've just got rid of some of that baggage now, because obviously he'd felt what he'd done with Donnie, like, yeah. And then they arranged to go on a date after school, but he never showed up this time. And he told her it was because he thought it was a casual thing with them two and it wasn't that serious. But later on, he told her that her dad had another seizure and he didn't want to tell her because she'd said about everything that was going on. She didn't want to get involved. But they had a chat and they agreed to go out. But Baz just had to tell her next time the truth. So then we move on to series 30, which went out in 2007. And this time Baz is in upper sixth. And you never see Baz's storyline going the way Baz's storyline went in this series, because he's still going out with Holly. He seems to be getting on with Donnie, but he's not, he's not bowing down to Donnie. He's not answering the questions Donnie's asking him about him and Holly and stuff. However, Donnie was still being an idiot, which was just Donnie's character, wasn't it? Now, Baz started talking to a younger girl called Annie, played by Sacha Parkinson, who again you might have worked with later on in Corrie. I know she turned up in Corrie for a bit.
She did. I don't think our paths crossed in Corrie, but certainly, obviously, on Grange Hill. Yeah.
And it was quite good this, because you just see them getting on. I don't know, he's a few years older. You see them getting on, and he told her he'd had a motorbike accident, and that's why he had like the scar on his leg. But can you remember what the actual motorbike accident was?
Oh no, you're gonna have to tell me. What was it?
His dad's motorbike had fell on him.
Oh, okay.
But Holly saw them talking and automatically feared the worst. And then she asked Baz to go to a dance class, but he said it wasn't his thing. He didn't want to know. Eventually, he did go, but he didn't dance with Holly. He danced with Annie. And then Holly saw them swapping phone numbers. So you're just thinking, oh my God, what's going on? But it turns out he was just she was giving him the phone number for a physiotherapist.
Yeah.
So it was all quite innocent. And it looked like things were going to start getting serious with Baz and Holly.
Yeah.
And Baz bought Holly a present. Can you remember what the present was?
Gosh, no. It's like being at a pub quiz where you don't know any of the answers. Go on, you have to put me on misery.
It's a balloon.
No, I was going to say a balloon. I was going to say a balloon because I know the scene that you're talking about. So but then I thought, just a balloon, or was it like a teddy?
A balloon with Baz for Holly written on it.
Oh, yeah.
And
I remember. That's funny. Yeah, I remember now, because on our rap party at the end of that series or whatever, Rob Norbury, who played Donnie, had a T-shirt on, which said, Donnie for Baz, which he done in sort of homage to that. So there you go. It rings a bell.
Brilliant. And then Baz went back to the dance class. He danced with Anna again, making both Holly and Togger jealous, because Holly was going out with Baz, but Togger had been going out with Anna. And Baz and Togger had an argument about it. And then there was a football training session, and Togger had another go at Baz, and Togger threw a wild challenge in. Baz got up and gave something back, and then they were separated, but there was a little bit of needle going on all the way through. Baz offered a truce, but Togger wouldn't accept. And then there was a ball played over. Baz jumped up for the ball. Togger went in, pushed him over. Baz hits the floor and never got back up. So you then joined a very exclusive club of people who died on screen in Grange Hill.
Yeah.
But I have to ask you, because that was only like 5 episodes in, like quite early on in the series. So I've got an idea why you left, but what was your reasons for leaving?
Well, for full transparency, I'd done the show for many years, and
Uh-huh.
I was planning to leave on the previous series before
Right.
that. I was
Okay.
filming some other stuff on the downtime, so we filmed Grange Hill for 5 or 6 months throughout the year, and then in between that, I was doing like Casualty. I was sort of semi-regular character, one of the
Uh-huh.
Doctor's sons on Casualty, doing a film. I had some. I was doing a film, and I felt it was a time for me to move on, and I knew that, quite frankly, that the character, you always kind of know where you're going to end with Grange Hill, because you leave school, and
Yeah.
unless you're one of the characters that ended up staying on, which are few and far between,
Yeah.
it's going to end. So I'd sort of thought, I prefer it to kind of be on my terms or whatever. I had some fantastic storylines, as we've
Yeah.
explored today. Um, and so I went to the producer and I said, I think this is going to be my last series at the end of the previous one, halfway through. And they then came back to me a couple of weeks later. They said, "Oh, are you really sure you that?" They come back to me a couple of weeks later and said, "Look, we've had some thoughts. If
Yeah.
you came back for a few episodes at the start of the next series, we've got this really, good storyline we'd like you to do, for your character, and the character will die, and then after that." Then the character will be part of the rest of the series
Yeah.
in effect, because there'll be obviously storylines that continue after you've gone
Yeah.
that relate to that horrible incident. So I thought, yeah, that sounds like a really
Yeah.
interesting way to end it all, really.
Yeah.
And so I was very pleased that they gave me that offer and opportunity to come back and
Yeah.
see everybody, and to do that again. And people didn't know about it. Again, it
No.
was something we talked about, and it wasn't kind of announced to the cast and crew and things, that was what was going to happen. So I
Oh,
knew I was coming back
wow.
to do it, and then it was done, and it was like soccer, for
Yeah.
people. So it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good. As you say, it's great to join an exclusive club.
Yeah. Well,
Sounds a bit weird when you talk about your character dying, but
yeah,
it
I
is an
mean,
exclusive club. Yeah,
I say it's an exclusive club because obviously between London and Liverpool, there was a big explosion at the end of London,
yeah,
and we
yeah.
never
A
knew.
lot of
Yeah,
characters.
like I say to people who were in them scenes who never came to Liverpool, what do you
Yeah,
think happened? And
yeah, yeah,
nearly every one of them says they think their character died,
yeah.
but we never knew because it wasn't really talked about.
No, no, I know.
When
It's pretty crazy, isn't it? That
yeah,
it was sort of just happened and then was
yeah.
sort of forgotten
Now,
and not. Yeah,
in the early days of Grange Hill, a lot of the actors, as they got older, they went. A lot of them ended up in EastEnders because obviously it was filmed
yeah,
in London.
yeah,
When it was filmed up north, quite a few ended up in Emmerdale or Coronation Street,
yeah.
and obviously you ended up in Coronation Street
That's right. Yes.
as Paul Clayton, a member of one of the greatest soap families of all time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
but anyone that doesn't know, he was a member of the Duckworth family. I mean, you played alongside Bill Tarmy and Liz Dawn, did you?
Yeah, yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean,
Very much so, yeah.
that must have been amazing with them two. Like,
Oh, incredible, really incredible. And being a lad from Manchester, and my mum, watched Coronation Street religiously, since I was a kid, and working, as you say, with those iconic characters and other iconic characters, just sitting in the green room and people popping in for a cup of tea that you've seen on screen all your life, is a hard thing, to put into words, even as cool as you want to be and as cool as you want to
yeah,
play it and all the rest of it. But yeah, no, I worked with those guys, and I was there for when Liz's character Vera died.
yeah,
That was a huge a nationwide
yeah,
story. It was on the front page of the of the newspaper saying, end of a Vera.
yeah,
And it was one of the highest watched episodes in a long time, on the show. And yeah, truly amazing to be a part of that, and just to watch them and how they work and how funny they were as a couple on
yeah,
set and off set, how they were just had a rhythm about
yeah,
them, having worked together so long.
yeah,
Just great. And Bill, really lovely guy, very much
yeah,
sort of took me under his wing, because I'm sure probably thought, how intimidating it must be to walk on as a young actor
yeah,
onto this set. But he never made it feel like that. But looking back now, he was always checking in and just being a genuine bloke,
yeah,
really, as he was. So yeah,
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 yeah. And he like,
really good time.
yeah, and Paul was like similar to Baz in some ways. It was like he was quite
Mm.
serious, quite intense, but he was a more of a bad lad, wasn't he?
Definitely more of a bad lad than Baz.
Than
Yeah,
Baz was. Like, what
yeah.
is it? Is it? Do you prefer playing those types of characters where they
Well,
got
I
an edge?
think
Like,
sometimes, the storylines are that I think it's definitely to play a character with an edge, because none of us are, all good or all bad or whatever. And actually Paul had quite a good sort of story arc where he came in and he was nasty, and he sort of turned a bit of a corner towards the end, where
Yeah,
actually he turned, he turned good, and he did some bad stuff. And he was the son of Terry Duckworth,
yeah,
obviously. So his kind of, lineage,
yeah,
the die, you could think the die was already cast.
yeah,
But actually, in the end, he turned out to be okay and nice, and he did the right thing in the
yeah,
end. He didn't take his granddad's money. He sort
yeah,
of left it there, but he did so. Yeah, he burnt down a restaurant for the insurance money, and he remortgaged the Duckworth's house,
yeah,
to take the cash. But as I say, in the end, he left the duffel bag with him. So I think it was nice to think
yeah.
he sort of ended up a bit more like Baz by the end,
Right,
So I
yeah,
kind of think like this. There's a full. If you think of the two characters, there's kind of this circle
yeah,
where he started at the kind of worst type of Baz, and then came back, and he was actually
yeah,
the nice,
yeah.
So it was,
Brilliant,
yeah,
brilliant. And
good
then,
character.
so yeah, and then like you were there for like what, 2 years, and then
Yeah, a couple of years there. Yeah, yeah,
and
and
then
I was on the run now.
yeah, because I read somewhere that there was talk of somewhere when you left, which was like, I mean, yeah, 17 years ago, there was
Yeah,
there
God,
was
yeah,
there was talk of it like being left. It was left open for Paul to return,
yeah.
but you have like sort of you're not acting anymore, are you? You've stepped away
No,
from acting now.
I have, yeah, yeah, and I always say I'll return. I will return one day.
Okay,
The
all
rover
right,
will return. But,
all right. So
but no, yeah.
so what are you doing now then?
So now I'm well. I suppose a businessman is the easiest way to sort of say it. So
Right.
I run a very a toy company. So I'm selling toys and designing toys and distributing them all around the world. And so I'm a CEO of a toy company called Marvin's Magic,
Uh-huh.
which we sell in 60 different territories all around the world. If you go to lots of different toy stores, if you go to Hamleys in London, for example, big famous toy store, or FAO Schwarz in New York, you'll
Uh-huh.
go in and you'll meet performers, demonstrators, actors, magicians, all that kind of stuff. All the people that in one way I come from that background of
Yeah.
of acting and performing. And what we do is we demonstrate products, we bring them to life in these iconic sort of tourist locations around the world, and we sell those products, and people take
Brilliant.
them away with us. And yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good business going from strength to strength.
Yeah.
Challenges at the moment with our friend Donald Trump,
I can
not making
imagine. Yeah.
things easy for us in the States. But we go to it with enthusiasm and
Yeah.
a spring in our step, and we'll be okay. But yeah, very different in many ways than the acting world, but also very similar.
Yeah.
It's about being confident and selling
Yeah.
yourself and all
Because
the rest of it.
I've
So
seen like some of your posts on, the different social media and stuff where
yeah,
you go to toy fairs and stuff like that.
yes.
And that for me, like I'm 50 this year, but that will be heaven for me. Just going somewhere
Yeah.
like that and just
Well, come along.
even
You're welcome anytime.
even if I'm working, just going around and just looking at stuff like that's brilliant for me. Because I've always said if I could retire and start my own business, I would just open up a toy shop because
Oh, really?
because
Brilliant.
you don't see little independent toy shops anymore, do you? Like
Not,
they're very
no,
few
not.
and far between. Like
Yeah, not as many as you should. No,
yeah,
definitely not. I think the Amazons of the world and all the rest of it have sort of,
yeah,
taken a lot of that away. But there are some great independent toy stores
yeah,
still running in the UK, but it's few and far between, as you
yeah,
say. And they're the people that run them work really, really hard and have a real passion for it.
yeah.
But yeah, if you're looking to set up, I can sell you some stock.
Definitely,
Anytime.
definitely, definitely. Okay, well, can I just ask before we get
Yeah.
to the end questions? Are you still in
Yeah.
touch with anyone from your time on Grange Hill?
Well, do you know what I think social media is a great thing because it allows you to see how people are getting on and all the rest of it, and from time to time we'll sort of talk to certain people. But I was good pals with a lot of other people that I grew up with, and we went on holiday together. I remember we all went
All
on
right,
holidays.
yeah,
I think we went to like Lanzarote or somewhere like that, which was a crazy
brilliant.
messy time for all of
I
us
can
when we were
imagine.
18 years old. but yeah, I mean, I was good pals with John Hudson, who
Yeah,
played Ian, and he actually came to my wedding a
brilliant.
few years ago. And you know, again, like Reese Noy, we mentioned
Yeah.
earlier. Reese was a good mate of mine, and you know, is but we don't see. I don't see. I think Reese is living in California now.
All right.
So yeah, if I'm in the States, I always text him and say I'm over here, and we always plan to meet up, and we never make it happen.
Right.
But again, I like to think we're all still good pals, because I think it's like people you grow up going to
Yeah.
school with. You know what I mean? You sort of have that friendship for life type thing, where if you just meet them again, you pick up where you left off from.
Yeah.
And just having this conversation with you today has made me feel incredibly nostalgic. So I'm gonna have to message them all. But yeah, like Matt Buckley, I lived with him for a while when I first moved
Wow.
to
Right.
London.
Yeah.
As you say, Martin, Holly Quinn, Sammy, you know, you know, all great people that I miss terribly actually now talking about it, and it'd be
Yeah.
great to do a reunion.
Yeah.
So maybe this has prompted that. I'll
Brilliant.
reach out
Brilliant.
to a few of them today.
Yeah, definitely, definitely do. Okay, well, we are coming towards the end of the interview, Tom. So I'm going to ask you the same few questions that I ask at the end of every episode. Okay, so
Okay.
the first one. So over the last couple of years, there's been talk of a Grange Hill movie
Mm.
in the works. What do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
I think anything that sort of brings Grange Hill back, you know, it would be a good thing. You know, I'd love to see, but I think you've got to see it done properly.
Right. Yeah.
And there's so many years of nostalgia, and I guess everybody's got their own. It's generational, isn't it? Everyone's got
Yeah.
their own era,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I talk to people, and as I meet people now, as I go through life, and I talk to them about. You know, you know, my previous life as an actor, and I was on Grange Hill. I go, oh, I was on Grange Hill. We won it, you know, we won it with Zammo, or we won it, you
Yeah.
know. And everyone's got their own kind of like, I used to watch that after school, and
Yeah.
oh God, it was really grown up, or my mum didn't used to let me watch it, or
Yeah.
this, that, and the other. So everyone's got their own era. So in a way, you think it's nice that it's everyone's got the nostalgia and bringing
Yeah.
something back. You know, you don't want to taint that, but at the same time, I'd love to see what it would mean
Yeah.
in this day and age. And right now, I mean, you know, very prevalent what we're talking about. You've got you know, the Stephen Graham adolescence thing that's come out, and that has really, you know, shocked
Yeah.
everybody. And I'm not, you know, I'm not comparing the two, but that is I think part of it is watching that adolescence thing is this what schools are like these days?
Yeah.
Is this a whole new era of challenges? You know,
Yeah.
they're the same sort of challenges that we all grew up with, whether it's bullying or whether it's coming to terms with your own sexuality or your own, you know, adolescence, you know,
Yeah.
as it is, or your parents, you know, or whatever it might be. So I think there's definitely a story to tell,
Yeah.
as adolescence has proven,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see
Yeah.
what happened with it. I'd love to see if it was Phil Redmond backed or something like that, because I think it's got to be done in the right way. You know,
Yeah.
it's got to be
Well,
done with.
that's the thing. Apparently, Phil Redmond has written it. Apparently,
Oh,
it's
really?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow,
So
that'd be amazing.
I think it's just it'll be funding, won't it? That like
Yeah,
everything, it'll be down to funding. I imagine.
sure. And it's
Yeah.
difficult because you don't want it to be just, you know, too, in my opinion, and everyone's got their own opinions. You don't want to be too kiddified or too
Yeah.
just I don't know, cheesy and
Yeah.
sort of made to just, you know, take the Mickey out of
Yeah.
itself. You know,
Yeah.
in a way, it should be fresh. Grange Hill
Yeah.
to me was where it's best, when it was pushing the boundaries,
Yeah.
looking forward, not just looking backwards. So
Yeah.
yeah, who knows? Fingers crossed that it would happen.
And
I'd love to see it.
if you were asked, would we see the ghost of Baz Wainwright?
Wow. Hey, there you go. Bill, if you've not put that scene in yet, this is it. I definitely do it. I definitely do it. Listen, I've sort of stopped acting for a while, but my mate had written a play, and
Right.
you know, I've talked about him before. Ben Nicholas, he's a comedian, and he's written this play, and he's somehow. As busy as I am with the business, he's managed to wrangle 2 weeks out of me in a
Brilliant.
theatre in March next year. So look, you know, I'm already starting getting warmed up. So if there's a, you know, if you need a ghost of Grange Hill past,
Yeah.
I'll join in there.
Brilliant.
Yeah, but no, I'll be delighted to. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So, other than Baz Wainwright,
Mm.
who was your favorite character in Grange Hill?
Wow. Oh, that's a good question. I liked Do you know what I liked? I like what the character Matt Buckley played, the Martin
Martin, yeah,
character, right?
yeah,
Because I think he was, Matt played it so beautifully, really like understated,
yeah,
and just was there. Never tried to overplay it or overact it, and it'd be so easy to do
yeah,
that with
yeah,
that
yeah,
character. And I think it's a real subtle performance. In all honesty,
yeah,
amongst all of the noise that you get from the bigger characters and the bombastic characters and all the rest of it. I think he
yeah.
played it really well. So I'm gonna give, not a lot of people will say Martin, but they should, because I think Matt's great guy, great, he did a great performance
Brilliant,
there.
brilliant.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't have played Baz, which other character would you like to have played?
Gosh, probably Maddie, because you got to kiss Baz, and as the gorgeous male clubber
Yeah, yeah,
that we know me to be. No, I know, I don't know. I always liked, when Reese came along
yeah,
as Taylor. He was cool. Reese
yeah,
came in, and he was after my season, and Reese is a cool guy anyway.
yeah,
Like just the epitome of cool. So I think Taylor came in and sort of stole a bit of that
yeah,
Baz's thunder, in this in the and or Togger. I worked with
yeah,
Chris
yeah,
very very much. He was obviously the bee's knees, and there was a lot of rivalry, as you mentioned,
yeah,
between our two characters. But he's another lovely lad, and
yeah.
and
He's a
our
good
kids go
lad
to the
to this.
same
Yeah.
our kids go to the same school.
All right,
I think I bumped into him in the car park once, and we said,
right.
let's go for a coffee. And we've never done it. So again, another one I'm gonna have to text
Brilliant.
after this
Yeah,
chat.
brilliant. Okay, so the final question then, Tom, and you've mentioned bits of it already, but
Yeah.
why do you think there's still such affection for Grange Hill?
I think it's because I mean, it's a British institution, isn't it?
Hmm.
Really, and you talk about Corrie, and you talk about EastEnders, and all the rest of it. And I think it's kind of up there. So the longevity of time,
Yeah,
and I think the fact that the boundaries kept being pushed, it kept being fresh, it kept being going forward, and they have a great conveyor belt of material, because
yeah,
kids are still coming in, and every time there's a new challenge.
yeah,
Whether you're a teacher, whether you're a pupil, whether you're the family of a kid,
yeah,
there's always new material, there's always new
yeah,
challenges, always new storylines, and I think that's why it was so fresh for so long. And as
yeah,
I say, everyone's got their generation, their era, and I think that's why people are so affectionate about it, because it speaks to them.
yeah,
We've all gone through school, and whether you were the popular kid, whether you were the unpopular kid, whether you were somewhere in between,
yeah,
I think you can relate. And Grange Hill gave you all of those characters and all of those storylines, so
yeah.
you could sort of see yourself fitting in. But I remember watching it as a kid, and before I went to high school, and being so nervous about going to high
Right.
school. I was like, oh my God, if it's anything like that, I don't want to go. I don't want to go.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you get in there, and you don't want to be, you're in year seven, and you're looking up at these big kids that have got beards, and all the rest of it. And then all of a sudden, you are one of those big kids. And,
Yeah.
so yeah, it speaks to all of us. And I think that's why people have such affection for it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, Tom, thank you so much for
Oh,
coming on
thank you.
and giving us your thoughts and your experiences on the program and in the industry and with Marvin's Magic as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, get the plug in there. I like it. Yeah,
no
if you want,
worries, no
you
worries at
need.
all.
No,
But
and honestly, thank you for doing this. It's amazing that you've brought so many people together
thank you.
to talk about such an institution. And honestly, the homework you've done there and reliving it with you, it really is a pleasure. It's a part of my life,
Yeah.
and one that I've got great affection for. So, we're really delighted to have spent the past
Oh,
bit of time with you.
no, thank you so much. Thank you. It's been great. It really, really has. So yeah,
Oh, cheers.
thank you once again. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye bye.